I was complaining about the color of this presentation. It all looks very boring up here. Somebody has bleached out all the yellows and oranges to make us look more green, but I'm afraid in looking green, we're looking a bit boring. So I'll try to color up my presentation so that you can see. I think technical issues. Never mind moving to a decentralized energy system. What about the presentation? Okay, so my name is Gareth Tankosic-Kelly. I am the least expert person to talk about this in this room. And the good news is that there's Alexander and Zvezdan and Nevena all here who are part of the team that did this, who know much more about this than I do on technical issues. So when we run into the technical questions, I'm going to quickly hand over to one of them, whoever can answer it, okay? What I'm going to talk to you about is something that I've seen that's happened throughout the process here today. All of us realize, I think your presentation said it the best, that the issue is not technical. The issue is political. It's not that we have reached the point where cost is not an issue, where baseload is something that a retiring engineer might still talk about at a conference, but nobody who knows anything about the future of decentralized energy would say. So in Southeast Europe, I'm going to tell you about how we used an energy model to engage in a policy dialogue with government, okay? And the reason I say alternative is because I don't think this is the alternative, I think this is the future. So why we keep calling ourselves alternative, I don't know. And Southeast Europe, I just want to tell you, we work in only, we don't work in Central and Eastern Europe, we work in Southeast Europe because they're all in the same legal framework of an organization called the Energy Community. That's why we work there. I can explain to you more about that if you like. So who are we? We are a group of people who came together as a virtual think tank in a project funded by the European Union to create fact-based dialogue. I'm making it easy for myself. You see here, I did the orange. It should be orange, but it's in fact a muddy brown. So if you lose any slide, just look for the thing that's a different color and you'll see that I'm reminding myself where I am, and if you fall asleep, you can catch up with me. So we are interested in having civil society produce fact-based advocacy for dialogue with governments, and that meant that we wanted to produce an energy model, and that meant that we wanted to have representatives from the region. Every country in the region is represented in this, and they all did work on the energy modeling, and we produced an energy model that covers all of Southeast Europe and every country of former Yugoslavia, plus Albania minus Slovenia, okay? So, a little bit complicated. And then we picked partners like Climate Action Network, Worldwide Fund for Nature, and Sea Bankwatch in order to provide us with more gravitas when we go to Brussels, because all of our countries, unlike Britain who's leaving, all of our countries would like to get into the European Union, and so that's a very big carrot. We say Merkve i stap, a carrot and stick approach. So joining Europe is a carrot for us. So how do we seek to, this is about the influence of energy modeling. I hope it's not going to be boring for you because it's not actually, I can talk about the energy model. We have technical reports here for you if you want to see, but this is more about what we did. The thing that I'm going to talk to you is about reframing policy. In our region, it's coal-based, it's centralized, it's large hydro, there's no reverse metering, there's any feed-in tariffs they give for wind or electricity are for, as the international financial banking people told me, they said, those feed-in tariffs are for friends and family. And then he said, no, I got that wrong. He said, those feed-in tariffs are given to an elite group of people, including friends, family, and lovers. So, feed-in tariffs for small hydro, and especially for solar, in most of our region, are extremely high return prices and designed to feed to the elites, not to change the energy system. Yeah. So, what we wanted to do was, as part of our strategy, we wanted to create a low-carbon roadmap for the region, and that meant we needed to have an energy model, and we did one for every country of the region plus the region itself. We did many other things as well, corruption in the energy sector, energy efficiency, etc., but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. So, models everywhere. Our energy model is led mostly by women. That's why there's none of them here today. Well, Nevid is here. Zvezdan is the only token male in the energy modeling group. But two of our modelers went to Taiwan to be in an energy modeling conference, global one, because of what they had done. And they were sitting in the park, and they're both women. And a man came up to them and said, "Oh, what do you do?" And they said, "We're models." And he said, "Yes, you look like models." And they said, "No, no, we're modelers." And he said, "Yes, you look like you could model." So don't be confused. It's why send a man to do a job when a woman can do it twice as well? So we had to decide which model we were going to use. And there's a lot of models out there, as we know. There's 100 decent models. We've already heard a number of them here, yeah? And we were told that the US government had paid for LEAP to be done for every country of our region. And we wrote to them saying, "Can we have the data and use the models?" And they said, "It's actually proprietary, it's owned by the governments, we have to ask them." And then the head of USAID flew to Sarajevo, where I live, to have a meeting with me, the head for our region, to apologize that no government would allow them to use the data in public. Now, some of that is to do with confidence issues in their own data. Some of it is to do with, a generic predisposition to not have transparency. And the more paranoid amongst us think it's because the model that the government has can show you that there's a pathway that doesn't include carbon. However, we weren't allowed to use that model, and we said that we would look for another model, yeah? And the main problem with all of these models are they're not transparent, you can't have the source code, the assumptions aren't published, they're owned by somebody, and they're not downloadable because you've got to pay for them if you're not an academic. And so we, through our network, through a discussion in our network, we ended up using a UK energy model called the 2050 calculator. And the reason we used it is because it's specifically designed not for experts, but for policymakers. And 2/3 of the work that this model does is about public dialogue on the data, the assumptions, and the results. So it's a simulation model, it's an input-output model. It can't model peaks and troughs in time slicing, but it does do costings and it can do pollution. You can add that on, it can be plugged into a Times-Markle model later if you wish. Its emphasis is on stakeholder, whoops, how do they all get out there? Its emphasis is on, how do I make this thing do what I want it to do? It doesn't appear to want to. Okay, never mind. Its emphasis is on stakeholder involvement, because the theory behind the one they used in the UK was, what's the point of producing another model that's a black box and telling people this is what it does when you don't consult with them about what the future is going to look like and get the buy-in of the people? So that was for us very important. It's also extremely transparent, it's free, it's an open source model. All of the data is uploaded in Excel. I don't know if you know this, but LEAP has a database that it's not actually in Excel. You can download it later and transfer it to Excel, and you have to pay for it if you're going to use it for non-academic purposes. This is open source. The model runs open source, I've told you that. It's got credibility. Well, when we started doing this model, about 20 countries in the world had used it. Some parts of Japan, South Africa. In Europe, there's one for Belgium and there's one for Ireland. But since we started this 4 years ago, the Potsdam Institute applied to Horizon for a project to build one of these calculators. They're called a 2050 calculator for every country in Europe. And they've just won that contract bid, and we're on the consortium of that, including Imperial College in London and Climact in Brussels. So it will be very exciting. And the reason we're on it is because Southeast Europe made a regional energy model before Europe did. Ha ha ha. For once we did something first, which we should be proud of. So I show you the men's photograph now. I'm talking to you about what we do in order to buy in stakeholder response. We want the governments and the academics to look at this model and not say, a bunch of NGOs did this, who gives a damn, yeah? We used Dan Kamen and Noel Kittner. They're both from Rail. It's institute in Berkeley. Berkeley, the most famous public college in America. It's not a private one, and it is Ivy League. Dan was the head of the World Bank's global rollout of its energy efficiency and renewables program. He's also worked in Kosovo and Albania, and he is an advocate for solar and a really experienced. He's advised Richard Branson, he's advised the Pope. He's a very useful communicator. He keeps on telling me, don't get stuck in the reeds whenever we have detail. He said, don't get stuck in the reeds. Big picture is, don't get stuck in the reeds. That's what he says. Barney Jeffries wrote the other part of this. He wrote for the Worldwide Fund for Nature their global 100% renewable roadmap. And we asked him to write it for us. And I didn't bring them here because I knew you were all technical people. But it's lovely. It's got loads of pictures in it and loads of diagrams. And it's, I won't call it an idiot's guide to a 2050 low-carbon society, but it's very pretty and very simple to digest, okay? I didn't bring it here because you people would be bored by it. Besim Islami, Tomislav, who's part of the team from Croatia. I saw Tomislav's name turning up there on the slides. And Alexander, who's here in the room. It's an Albanian, a Croat, and a Macedonian. We use these people to bounce ideas off. It was very interesting, I think Alexander will tell you, very interesting being with a bunch of NGOs in a room talking about assumptions and data. Because you have people who are professionals who get paid by major institutions to do things and make models, talking with NGOs about data. So that's a two-way street where NGO people get to learn a lot and also professionals get to reduce maybe some of their prejudice. Maybe they reduce their prejudice about each other. Would that be a fair way to say it? And then we, very importantly, Michel Cornet is from Climact. They worked on the version of this for the International Energy Agency. So he's very good from the global perspective. And he was our coach. He coached the two models, you know, the ladies who were in Taiwan. He was the coach for that team. He coached them. Then they coached all of the partners in the region. So it was a learning by doing approach, yeah. And last but not least, Guy Turner. He's originally from Bloomberg. He's one of their key financial evaluators for costs. And this model includes two kinds of costs, CapEx and OpEx. So capital costs and operating costs for different types of things. And we were so worried that we were going to be, you know, torpedoed by the government for our costs being ridiculous that we got Mr. Guy Turner from Bloomberg. And then when they said, oh, where'd you get your costs? We said, well, they're audited by Bloomberg. That's the end of the conversation. That's it. You're done. 5,000 euros for the report. Best money we ever spent. Because in our region, everyone knows Bloomberg, CNN, Rolls-Royce, you know, they know those things, yeah? Bloomberg. Ma che cosa fai, huh? As the Italians would tell you. What's the other thing that we do? When we produce our reports, we always get somebody much better known than us with leverage to write the foreword. Does anybody know who the man on the left is? He's former Prime Minister of Poland, former President of the European Parliament, and most importantly, he's the head of the ITRE committee of the European Parliament, which deals with energy and research. And we got him to write us a thing entitled, The Future is Low Emissions Prosperity. And he's a former Polish Prime Minister. So when you open any of our policy documents, you always have someone on the front page. The pretty one that I didn't bring you is, does everyone know who Dr. Bertrand Piccard is? He's the man who put solar aeroplane around the world, yeah? So he literally has flown a solar aeroplane around the world, and they just finished doing it in Abu Dhabi. Yeah, took them a couple of... So we actually just called him up. I called him on the phone. They have an office in Switzerland. Then it says you're being, you know, sent to another location. And then I get, hello, this is Dr. Piccard. And I said, hello, I'm calling you from Sarajevo. He said, I'm just about to land the airplane in Dayton, Ohio, and he's on a satellite phone. And I said, wow, do you know the Bosnian peace agreement was signed in Dayton, Ohio? And he said, and the Wright brothers flew from Dayton, Ohio. And he said, of course I'm going to write your foreword for you. So having these kind of people is useful because, and we use all different kinds of people like this, because they are people who become your friends, yeah? Now he's talking about coming to our region to do some kind of promotion with us. And where he comes the world media. I don't know if you've seen his Twitter feed when he's flying. He posts photographs from over the Atlantic, and he has like hundreds of thousands of followers. So we use them. Oh yes, another thing we do is we do marriages. We also do marriage guidance counseling. No, that's a joke. Part of the thing about energy modeling in our region is the data. Who has the data and which data is reliable? So we had 1,500 individual consultations. If you count all of the people that we've met and shown the data, taken data from, talked to about data, in Brussels, in the region, that will be 1,500 individual contacts, okay? And then, before you launch your energy model, because you know your energy model is going to show scenarios that will be unpleasant for the coal industry, you make sure everyone agrees on the data. And you have what's called the call for evidence. And that's where you say to everyone, speak now or forever hold your peace. So it's just like the priests in those Hollywood weddings. If you can think of a reason why our data is not good enough, give us different data and we'll use it. And that happened in each country in the region, usually with the British ambassador and the head of the EU delegation and a minister. So what we're trying to do there is bed down the data as being something that everybody accepts before we start doing modeling. And it's very important in terms of the consultation process. Okay, so I'll come back to that in a minute. So we made two versions of the model.
Can I ask you to conclude soon?
To conclude soon?
Yes. Thank you.
You can ask me.
Please.
Can I have 5 minutes? 3 minutes.
I would ask you all to respect
all right.
that
Okay.
I'm limited.
Yes, okay. Very good, Cherry. This is our model. We have two versions of it. We have this technical version, and then we have a cartoon version of it. So for every country of the region, we've got city, village, house, city, and country. And we've got the levers here on supply side and demand side, okay? And these things are like video games, which my daughter told me, Dad, that's really boring. But every minister in the region uses it, because she kept on saying, what are you doing? I said, I'm making a video game for energy. But the truth is that it's not for children, it's for ministers. This is what it looks like, the boring version of it. And it's got three things: final energy demand on the top there, primary energy supply, and greenhouse gas emissions. It's written in Albanian here, so you can get it in every language in the region. And you can also get scenarios. So we've got a 100% res scenario. We've got an EU 2050 80% reduction scenario. We've got a solar scenario. We've got a business as usual scenario. And we've got what we call the road to nowhere scenario, which is all the coal they could build in no res. Okay? So I'm nearly finished now. So we also wanted to awaken public about this. And so what we did was, when we started campaigning, we had a signature-driven campaign, and we got famous people from the region. You don't recognize this. This guy on the left is the Mick Jagger of Yugoslavia. And this woman is Eurosong singer from Montenegro. And these are people from different organizations, okay? And then we had the Yes We Can moment. We made a roadmap, technical version, which is here, and the other half of this road, which is the advocacy one, and we published them. And it shows, unsurprisingly, that you can change the entire strategy towards EU 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for give or take the same cost as their current investment plan. Okay? So we got hijacked. Last thing I'm going to say to you. We got hijacked. The European Union didn't know what we were doing, even though they gave us the money. So they had a ROM, a results-orientated mission evaluation, which just finished about a month ago. And it said about us, the national authorities are well aware of, involved in the modeling process, which was tick number 1 for us. Interaction with the ministry's technical operators is remarkably good, tick number 2 for us. And the ownership at the level of EU institutions is very good, which proved all of the things that we wanted. We wanted the model because we wanted the involvement, yeah? So, now we get to the real people who deserve the credit for all of this, and you should give them a round of applause, even though... See, The people who did all the modeling, collected all the data, are these people. And even though none of them are here today, except for Zvezdan, he's the token man. We like to have a token man. These are the people who deserve all the credit for that positive analysis that we got. And that's it. Thank you very much.